Today is 10 June 2009. We are at the Isaac C. Griswold Public Library in Whitehall, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. I'm with the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, New York. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth, please?
Joseph Marcino, 5/25/23, Whitehall, New York.
Did you attend school in Whitehall?
Yes, I did. Graduated in 1941.
All right. And at that point, did you go on to any advanced schooling, or did you go into
No.
the service?
No, I didn't go any place for 1 year. At that time, the football team had 3 years of a good record. 38, 39, 40 untied, unscored upon. And so most of us, we come back, and at that time you could come back in what they call it PG, postgraduate.
Oh, really?
Take a shorthand and typing and those subjects that didn't have homework. And so that we could keep that string going. And so that's where we stayed on, and we played football that fall of 41. And we got beat in the last game of that year, but we got tied 2 times, and that was like death warmed over when the record went down. Look magazine came up after the first game. We had beaten Rutland the first game, and we were playing Mineville, and we should have beaten them, but they had you know, a big hullabaloo, bonfires and a dance and all that kind of business, and so I guess our minds got taken up with all the hullabaloo, and Mineville tied us, and we thought it was the end of the world. And then Glens Falls tied us. We won all the other games, and at the last game of the year, Johnstown beat us, and that the undefeated streak ended at that time.
Do you remember where you were and what your reaction was to the attack on Pearl Harbor?
I'm not sure. No, I can't tell you that for sure.
Okay. That was December 7th, 1941.
Right.
And when did you go into the service?
The following year, December 8th, 1942.
Okay. What did you do during that period before you went into the service?
Oh, I went to work at the railroad. And during those years, you know, after you graduated from high school, you either went on to college or you found a job and got work. So that's where I was. I wasn't planning to go to college, and so I went to work. And I worked up at that time the roundhouse, they called it, where the engines come in and got reserviced in a big turntable. And at that time there was about 16 rows of track out on the southern part of Whitehall. And you know, railroad was a big thing. So I was a water tender on the late shift. That you go in each engine and check the water to be sure the water level was right, and if it wasn't right, you'd turn the valve and fill the tanks with water. And that was your job. And if the gauge was already filled and it's hard to tell whether it was filled or whether it needed something, then you call, and you weren't sure, then you called the foreman. Because that's dangerous. You know what I mean? If it was dried, if there were no water in it at all, the thing could explode. So a lot of times with that plastic tubing, it was hard to tell where the water level was, whether it was up too far, and so you not having experience, so you'd come in, the first thing you'd get up and they'd check that, and boy, if it was a problem, hey, hurry up and run to get the foreman, because he had the experience of telling whether that gauge was empty or whether it was too full. So that's what I did. And let's see. Now I'm not sure of what happened what, oh, I know, my brother got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
They had, at that time, they were starting with the older guys and working themselves down to the younger ones, and so we felt, okay, we didn't want to wait until they got down to us. So another guy and I said, hey, let's go fight the Japs.
Mm-hmm.
And
So you enlisted in the
so we
Marine Corps.
enlisted, and yeah, we had to go over to Rutland, took the train over in Rutland, and enlisted.
Now, why did you pick the Marines?
Well, that's a good question. I just felt, oh, I know, I like the uniform.
Uh-huh.
And they were supposed to be, you know, they were supposed to be rough and tough and that kind of business. So Bob LaFrance and I, he was in the class, in the same graduating class.
Mm-hmm.
We said, let's go fight the Japs. And we got in the train, went over to Rutland, and he got approved. And my feet were flat, and I was missing one tooth. You had to have a whole set of teeth. You know, otherwise you couldn't get, they wouldn't accept you. So that was disturbing to me. So we come back home, and Joe Manel, who was the caretaker for the playground, right? Yes. And so we come back to the playground, and I'm telling him, hey, you know, I played football and track and everything else. I say, how can this prevent me from going to? And he says, I know the recruiter over in Rutland. So he says, so he called him up, and the next morning he said, send him back over here. So I went back over the next morning. In the meantime, Bob LaFrance, they had already started him, and he went ahead of me. So I went over the next day and got approved, and then went home and told the folks and so on that I'm going to the Marines. And let's see, I'm not sure what date did I go. December 8th? Yeah, December 8th.
1942.
1942, right. Went to Parris Island. And when we got off the train, I can't think of the name of the town off Parris Island, but where the train stopped. We got off the train, and the Marine Corps guys were there with a truck, a rack truck. And there were a lot of guys on the train, you know, and they loaded us up on the rack truck. It were so tight you couldn't fall down.
Mm-hmm.
And when we crossed the bridge going into the island, they said, all right, this is the last place, this is the connection between the land and where we're going to be. And he said, don't try to escape, because this is alligators are all over here. And so they scared the hell out of us, and said, "This, so take a look at it, because you're not going to be back here for, you know, at least 3 more months."
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite a thing.
Well, was that basically your first time away from home?
Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Only time.
What was it like down at Parris Island? You went down in December, so was it kind of cold down there?
It was cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool. You could be in t-shirts and so on.
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina. So the weather was conducive, and they read you the riot act.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first thing you do, you stand in line, get your hair cut bald, right? You sit in the chair, boom, boom, a couple of machines, and they take you out. Then you go between 2 doctors. One gives you a shot in this arm, one gives you a shot in that arm, and then after everybody got through that, they take you back and they introduce you to the drill sergeant, and he's the king.
Mm-hmm.
In boot camp. And then he reads you the riot act.
Mm-hmm.
About you know, you got to get up every morning at a certain time. You got to shave every morning. They don't tell you what happens if you don't shave, but they tell you the rules, and then you find out what happens if you don't do it.
Uh-huh.
You got to make up your bed every morning. You got to keep it picked up, and so on. We meet on the parade ground certain time, and in formation, and so no hands in a pocket. You couldn't get, you know, you could never put your hands in a pocket. So anyway, what happens if you do? So you learn that by after you get in formation, the first thing, the drill sergeant comes up and he shakes the back of his hand on you to see if you shaved. I mean, if it looks like you might not, he does this. So the guy next to me got this. Oh, you didn't shave, huh? So he pointed at me. All right, you go and get your razor. So I went and get my razor. All right, shave him. And they bring the guy to attention. He's there at attention, and he reaches down and gets sand. The parade ground is all sand. Where you drill, and he gets a handful of sand and he rubs it over the guy's face like that. So I'm going scratch, 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 and blood is coming down, and you got to stand there at attention. So then, with a lesson to be learned, right? And he said you shave every morning. So no, some guys have never shaved before. You know, they were light-haired and blonde and so on, and never needed to shave. We used to shave probably maybe once a week, once in a while, or if we were going to some place, we'd shave. But shaving wasn't a regular thing. So you learn, hey, that you don't take any chances. You've got to shave. So. And then every so often you'd have colonel's inspection, and he would open the door and he'd take his white gloves out of his belt like this, you know, all intentional, and put them on and make it intentional that as he comes through the door he'd reach above his head and drag his gloves across the frame of the door and look at it. And if there's any dirt and dust on the shade, he would, the whole barracks would be on probation. So, so in other words, you would be sure Fridays, when you clean the barracks, you know, you clean the floor, dust, everything's got to be cleaned, so you wouldn't have that happen, because once you're on discipline, then you couldn't go any place for a week. And the whole barracks would be so-called quarantine, you know. And then to check your beds, if it was done right, he'd come over, take a quarter out of his pocket, and he'd flip it up like that. Now, if it didn't bounce a little bit, he'd grab a hold of the whole thing and rip it up, rip the whole thing. You had a bunk, the bottom bunk and the top bunk. He'd grab the bottom, rip it all off, and you'd have to make it all over again. So, so he said, okay, you got to make it up right. See, they showed you, in the first few days, they showed you how to make the bed up. And if you did it properly, it would be nice and tight. The blanket would be tight. And, you know, it had a little bounce to it, so the quarter would bounce. So, anyway, those are things that you learned from what he told you. You know, you have to do this and you have to do that. Didn't tell you what would happen if you didn't do it. So you learned by making a mistake or not doing it. Okay, so where are we now from that?
Okay, you're in basic training. Now, what type of weapons did you train on in basic?
The M1 rifle. Okay, in other words, we took the rifle. That was the major rifle at that time, and you had to learn how to take it down, take it apart, oil it up, and they showed you the process. And you'd have to do that enough times where the test would be to do it when you're blindfolded. Put a blindfold on you, and you'd have to put it back together. Disassemble it, and put it back together with a blindfold on. And then you could pass the test. Now, if you didn't do that, if you didn't clean it, when the drill sergeant would come each morning, you know, he'd come to attention, he'd take your rifle, and he'd check if there's any, you know, little piece of sand in the head of the screw, he'd throw it down in the sand. You'd have a light coat of oil on it, you know what I mean? And if you threw it down in the sand would stick all over it, and then that was a major job of trying to clean it again. So you learn from that. They say, hey, you got to clean it right, you see? And that's what you do. You inspect it to see if there's anything in there. So anyway, by doing those things, you learn the discipline.
And what about the physical training? A lot of that, push-ups and runs? And
yes, each morning, right, you do that, and then you'd meet in formation, and they would tell you what was going to happen that day, and then, you know, running and obstacle course and conditioning type activities.
What about bayonet training? Did you have any of that?
Not at that point. see, that was later on.
Okay.
Because you know, this is the beginning. Everybody did this, whether you were, regardless of what you were.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody went through that same training, and then from there, you went on to. Most of us went to Camp Lejeune, and unbeknownst to us, we went into radio school and learned how to do the Morse code, you know, the dot, 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 that kind of thing.
Yep.
Everybody had to learn that, and you had to pass it. And they had, after you went through that, you had to graduate.
So you were being trained as a radio operator?
Well, everybody had to learn that, and then from there, you went to send some other place. See, so now unbeknownst to me, I was headed for the tanks.
Mm-hmm.
See, now we're someplace along the line when they asked about where you wanted to go, I had mentioned I might want to go in the tanks because you're not sure what you want to do. Well, I'll go in the tanks. So the first requisite is you need to know the radio system and how to do it, and as if you were going to be in the rifle squad or in infantry. So everybody learned infantry tactics. So in the event that whatever you were doing, you were still able to survive and do the things that were required of you.
Mm-hmm. So after Lejeune, whereabouts did you go?
After Lejeune, all right, stayed there for a while and learned mess duty. Mm-hmm. Everybody had something to do, but some who were going on to some other place, they left casual company. They stayed there until it was a period of 6 weeks, and then they took them off someplace, and I stayed on. Out of my group, there were 85 that took the Morse code test, and so they called everybody's name, and you went up to the desk and you got a paper to tell you where you were going to go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting there, they packed up their things and going, and I'm sitting there all by myself and saying, hey, what's happening here, you know? So, and the last guy out says, hey, what's happened to you? And I said, my name wasn't called. So they went back and they got their records, and so they found out I wasn't even on the list. So I stayed in casual company and learned mess duty while they were trying to decide where I was going to go. Mm-hmm. I learned something at that time that you would go to get on sometime. You know, you had to learn mess duty sometime before you got on to where you're assigned to a group, a division or a platoon or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I stayed at casual company for a while, and then let's see, where did I go from the casual company? Before I leave, the other thing I didn't cover, if you put your hands in your pocket, what they would do to you, they'd fill your pockets with sand and sew them up. And you'd have to, for the rest of your time in boot training, you'd have to wear your pants with all full of sand, the 4 pockets full of sand and sewed up. So, so you had a reminder. All right, haircut, no liberty. Okay, so all right, I did go home at the end of the boot camp for 1 week. I had the furlough, and that was, I think, the only time I was home. Camp Lejeune Radio School, casual wait for mess hall duty. Okay, at the end of that time, they sent me to San Francisco, and they had guys coming from different parts of the country. On the East Coast, Paris Island was the recruit training. On the West Coast, it was San Diego. And so there were guys coming from all over. We went to San Francisco and learned guard duty. There was a radar station on the outside of the northern part of San Francisco, and they put onto us what we called subsistence. They would pay you, and you had to find your own place to stay. So we stayed at the YMCA, and they give us enough money to pay the rent, so-called, and we were free. We put in 8 hours a day at the radar station, then we were free to do what we wanted to. So in the meantime, they were determining where they would send us. So we spent 2 months at San Francisco, and all we went was every day, go up to the stand guard duty on. You had to be in uniform, but when you come back to your room to go out at night, if you so desired, you could go in your dress clothes, your street clothes. So we stayed there for 2 months, and then we went to, got a call that I was to go to Jack's Farm. It was a tank school down in the southern part of San Diego. Was an olive grove, a former olive grove that had cleared some of the things, some of the trees, and still some of the trees still had olives on them and so on. And that was the tank school where you learned how to drive a tank and learned how to manipulate a tank. And so at that time we were in, the tanks were, they had 2 motors, and they were diesel tanks, and that was the only tank. We had the medium tanks. They had light tanks, medium tanks, and heavy tanks, but we didn't have heavy tanks, and there were some light tanks around, but we learned in the medium tanks. There were dual engines, and at that time, that run by diesel fuel, and you use a shotgun shell to start them. You put a shotgun shell in the chamber and pull the lever, and the explosion would start the engine. So anyway, we learned all the things about how to drive a tank. You get up in the morning and get your tank started. Everyone assigned a tank, and you'd go in a convoy. You go outside of this Jack's Farm area where they had the tank school, learning how to go over terrain and determine the power of the tank and the ability of the tank and how to manage if it broke down and those kind of things. So the thing that I learned besides driving the tank is this was during the winter now. Let's see, that's a 42, that's the winter of 43. Yeah, right. Right. It's the winter of 43, cold. Okay, you come back from driving the tank all day long, and you'd be covered with dust. Everything. Clothes, tank, and so on. All right, you had to clean your tank off, and then you had to take a shower and clean your clothes and whatever. And see, some guys, they just went in their bunk and didn't shower or nothing. And they said, how can you do that? So there was an open shower. Just they had canvas stretched out with a rod over the top, and had stall showers made of canvas, and you're out of doors. It's all cold water with no hot water.
Oh, God.
And so that was tough, but we got through it. All right, and from there, where did we go? See, Casual Company, then we went to Aliso Canyon Camp Pendleton. Okay, so at this time now, with your ability, they assessed your ability to see what you were, what you could do, and so on, and you took some written tests and driving tests, and they determined about where you were going to be within a tank crew. So then from there we went to Camp Pendleton, and I'm not sure whether it was the southern part. Yes, it was southern part of Camp Pendleton. They had this area, so many acres, 100 some odd acres, where you had tank training as a group. And at that time, now they assigned you to a position in the tank. There were five positions in the tank: the driver, assistant driver, the loader, a gunner, and a tank commander. So at that time, I got my assignment as a tank commander and met the other four guys that were going to be in my tank.
Mm-hmm. What rank were you?
I was sergeant at that time. And all the tank commanders were sergeant, except each platoon had one officer who was in charge of the platoon, second lieutenant. But this was the first start of getting organized. In other words, in their minds, they knew where you were going, but we didn't know where we were going or what we were going to do. All we knew is, hey, we're assigned to a tank, and we went through tank maneuvers, learned your crew and so on. You stayed in a tent with your crew, and you learned about each other and that kind of stuff. And, my driver was a 17-year-old guy from Seminary, Mississippi, who had his records forged because you couldn't get in unless you were 18. But he wanted to go so badly, he had his records forged so he could get into the Marines. He came as a little baby-faced guy who, you know what I mean, you say, wow. And so I didn't find that out until later. But anyway, he was the driver. Assistant driver was from Bakersfield, California. The loader, and because of the position in the tank, the loader had to be a smaller type guy because he was responsible for half the turret and feeding the two guns, the 75 millimeter and the machine gun. So it would be to his advantage if he was smaller. A bigger guy would take up too much room. So I had a little guy from Iowa was my loader, and the gunner had to be had the experience from the had a good eye from the rifle range. After you know, in the end part of boot camp, before you left there, you had to go to rifle range and practice shooting the rifle, and got tested on your ability. And those who ranked to the top got assigned to be a gunner, and he was from Michigan, Bob Carnahan. So you learn about each other, learn about what your responsibilities were, and let's see, we spent most of our time there till they started putting the 5th Tank Battalion together. We had maneuvers and so on, and we were able to, we're between San Diego, about halfway between San Diego and Los Angeles, that the tank school. And so we were able to go on liberty on the weekends. Up to that time, you know, we didn't have, when we were in basic training and so on, and in Camp Lejeune, we weren't able to go on liberty. So Friday, after we secured everything and put the tanks away and cleaned up, we were going to liberty till Monday mornings. You had to make a formation on Monday morning.
Okay, now you're at Pendleton. So you were forming up to go overseas at that point?
Yeah, they were planning on, at that time, of course we didn't know, but they were forming to make the 5th Division, and since we were in the tank, the 5th Tank Battalion, a part of the 5th Division. So our concern was, we were doing the part to be, to form the 5th Tank Battalion. There were 90 tanks in the whole battalion.
When did you end up going overseas?
Let's see, we went November of '44, San Diego to Hilo. Okay, yes. We went to Hilo. 7 days took us to get to Hilo, and it was about 2,500 miles. It took 7 days. And at Hilo, then we started putting the division together. We were at the base of the Mauna Loa volcano. That was, at that time, I think it was the largest volcano in the world, or next to the largest. And
it was an active volcano too, wasn't it?
yes, yes, it was. And we had rubber tracks on the tanks at that time. But because of the volcanic ash, we didn't know this until it happened, but each time the volcano erupted, they would put a stake on where the ash stopped. And you know, from way back when, the 1800s and so on. But in the meantime, all the surface of the mountain between Hilo, which is the capital on the east coast, we had to go across the island to the west coast. That's where the volcano was, and it was our tank camp and the 5th Division camp. But because of the makeup of the volcanic ash, it would melt the rubber. So we had, the first job we had to do is take the tank track apart and put on steel tracks, steel treads. So then we went over the mountain, and then when we got back over the mountain, dropped down to where we were going to go, we had to take the steel tracks off and put the rubber tracks back on.
Okay, and how long were you there on Hilo?
All right, we were at Hilo until, let's see, Hilo left, Hilo, all right, we're one day, okay, November, all right, from July to November.
Of 44.
Of 44, right.
And then where did you go next?
Now, we had to go, since we were on the back side of the island of Hawaii, we had to go to Hilo first in order to get into the ship to get to go to, which we didn't know where we were going at that point. But, so they loaded us into LCTs. The tanks traveled in 3 kinds of ships. LCT, which was a smaller type ship, and it was designed really for 3 medium tanks. But since we were only going to 90 miles around the island of Hilo, of Hawaii, we put, it was the day before Christmas, or day before, excuse me, the day before Thanksgiving. And it was a nice sunny afternoon around 3 o'clock, and by the time we got 3 tanks in there, you could reach over and touch the water. That's how far in the water we were, see? And, you know, it was questionable. But they said, you know, the water is fairly quiet, and so we could make it, all right? When we got between the islands, the island, what was the next one, Maui? I don't know how, when we got between that area anyway, the water broke up. We had a big windstorm, and I can swear that you remember Our Lady of Angels Tower, the cross on the top? The waves were that high. We ride up on the wave, and then the wave, when they pass by on you, you come down like you were in a quick elevator. Boom. And see, and up, and then boom, and shake down. Well, all the tanks were turnbuckled down to the deck. Okay, you had a hook on the tank and a hook on the floor of the deck of the ship, and then a turnbuckle, and you tighten them up, and so on. And then on each side, they had 2 tanks in the back and 1 in the front, and a weasel on each side of the front tank. That was like a small, well, like a Jeep, only with wide tracks, probably almost 2 feet of tracks. You could go into a swamp with it, water and so on, you know, that was how it was made. There weren't too many made, but in the event, because they didn't know what kind of surface we were going to deal with, they were going to bring some weasels, so they brought a weasel on each side of the lead tank. And well, the turnbuckles on the lead tank, which was my tank, snapped. and so the front of the tank was during the it squeezed that weasel on this side, and then squeezed the weasel on that side, and crushed them. I mean, it's 33 ton.
Mm-hmm.
So the captain on the ship we were at has the tower on the side. I don't know what they called them, but the tower on the side, and he was up in there, and he howled, "You Marines, go down there and fasten that tank up." And it was my platoon, so something that you don't do, but I said, none of us are going down there with 33 ton moving back and forth. And he says, "I'm going to have you marshaled." I said, "You can do whatever you want, but we're not going down in that deck with that tank moving like it is." So anyway, I started getting sick. My basic problem through the whole time is to get seasick.
Mm-hmm.
So I started getting seasick, and I know, boy, how things were. So anyway, I'm laying on the back of my tank, and most of my crew was down with the sailors down in their compartments, and it was near time to get fed, and they were having getting something to eat. And I went through the whole thing, and I upchucked everything, and then went into dry heaves, and that's where your stomach's still boiled, but there's nothing coming out. And that was probably my worst time in the Marine Corps. And so anyway, we couldn't keep in the convoy. We couldn't stay with the convoy. The water's coming on the deck, and it was a good foot of water, and the captain was shouting to the sailor, and the sailors got all sick. So he couldn't get anybody to do anything, and the water was coming up into his tower. In fact, they had a big fish got up in there. That's what the water was so bad. So anyway, they decided to cut all the motors and let the water take you where it would go instead of trying to fight and go a certain direction. So they went with the water, and we lost the convoy. And they went on. It was 90 miles from where we started over to Hilo, and they figured maybe 5 or 6 hours. Well, it took us 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was so sick that I was in sick bay for 2 weeks. And I know for the first week I couldn't get up. I was in a cot for that time, and the next day was Thanksgiving. And everybody was having Thanksgiving meal and so on, but I was in no condition for that. So anyway, that was an unpleasant experience. Okay, so we left in January of '45. Now we started talking about an LCT, and we went. At that time, we were going into LST. That was a bigger ship where you could drive the tank right in it, and I can't think of the gate they let down, but the front of the ship had a ramp, a big ramp. You let the ramp down, you drive your tank in, and then that was a landing craft also, but you couldn't get in as close to the beach because it was heavier and it went down into the water more. The LCT could get closer to the beach because it didn't take on as much water, but this was a heavier tank. And so anyway, we drove all of our tanks onto LST. They took all 90 tanks. I forget now how many LSTs there were, but that's where we started to get ready to go to Iwo Jima. We didn't know where we were going, but we went to Pearl Harbor. We stopped at Pearl Harbor, took a couple of days, and got supplies. And then we left there. All right, we left there and went to Inuitak. It was a little island between Saipan and Iwo Jima, and it was 10 days. And they got supplies, ammunition, food, K rations, fuel, you know, fueled up and so on. And that took 10 days to get there. And then we left there on the 3rd of February. And we went to Saipan, 7 days. And then they loaded us onto LSDs. England made 5 ships at that time. They called them landing ship dry dock, where you could drive the LCTs or so on right in, and then they'd like the locks in the canal, they'd flood the deck, and you drive in, and they let the water out, and it was like a tub. I mean, when it traveled in the water, it was like this, you see, because it was rounded out, the bottom was rounded out, so it's another time to get sick. But anyway, so we changed ships, and it was 3 days, and 16th, and then we went. That's where we landed in Iwo. Well, okay, at the landing. Now, do you want to take some time to talk about the landing, or where are we now? From now, we're going to Iwo Jima. We're ready to land on Iwo Jima.
Okay, whatever you want to talk about. Were you in the first wave?
No, I was in the 4th wave. What they did. All right, here we are. We were down here, the 5th Division. This is Suribachi, the volcano.
Yep.
Okay, the 5th Division had this part of the beach, and they're called Red. We were in Red 1, and then the 4th Division was from here up to here. And when the big ships when you got up in the morning, you were up before daylight, and then they already determined which wave you were in, and the waves. I can't think of how many those LCTs were in a wave, but you got in, and that wave, okay, wave 1, you could go in a circle. Wave 2 would be in another circle. Wave 3 would go around in a circle until you got the signal. And all the waves, you know, you come off your big ship, got into the wave you were assigned to, and you went round and round until somebody gave you the signal to go to the beach. And as soon as you got the signal, then you would fan out. And go side by side, not really that much, you know, you had maybe 20 yards between you. And then you would go into the beach, and on a timed basis. So I was Red 4, so they had sent 3 infantry, 3 waves of infantry, then 1 wave of tanks, and I was in that next wave of tanks. Then 3 waves of infantry, 1 wave of tanks, and that's what they did.
What was the landing like for you?
All right, the landing was easy. Let's go back. We'll go back and cover what was that part of it, and then come back to the landing. But the Japanese had prepared Iwo Jima it was a fortress, really. There was no livelihood in it. There were hardly any trees, no vegetation, nothing. It was a fortress, and unbeknownst to us, they had bombed that for 66 days. So it was, you know, they said, hey, there should be nothing alive there, nothing. You know what I mean? So. Oh, okay. What the Japanese had done is they had connected the island with underground tunnels, hand dug, pick and shovel marks. They had all tunnels, like a maze of the spider web, all in it, so they could go any place underground. So all the bombing didn't hurt them at all, see? And They estimated it must have taken them at least 50 years to dig that island like prepare it like it was. Okay, Suribachi was on one end. That was the highest spot on the island, and then in between Airfield 1 and Airfield 2, there was the next highest part. So those two parts were the highest part of the island, and they had built that up and had all their ammunition, guns, and artillery and so on in both spots. So they commanded the island from that part, and so their aim was to let us come on. You see, we didn't have the normal landing from the previous landings of the Marine Corps, where you had to fight to get in there. This was something different, unexpected. You had a couple of shots here, a couple of shots there, and maybe from a pillbox on the beach, but there were two terraces, all made of this ash, see? And so that was a little bit different. But what their aim was, let you come on, and now they commanded the two high points on the island, and they had it, see this, all these mapped in grid. This is all grid numbers, and you got each of the little small squares. So you could tell where any big gun was or so on. Now they had something similar on their part, but all the officers and all the tank commanders had a map like this. So their aim was to let us all come on, and then the 3rd Division was in reserve. The 3rd Division came along just in case that we didn't, the 2 divisions weren't enough. They had them as reserve. So for 3 days, we got bombarded from all kind of ways, and we're in desperate things. We're in there, we're running out of fuel, running out of ammunition, running out of food, and we're desperate.
Now, what kind of tank were you on?
I was on a medium. It was a General Sherman, they called them.
Okay.
And we put boards on the side. You see, now we go back a step. So I'm saying, how far do we go ahead before we go back to where the landing? All right, where are your thoughts? You want to go back to see how we prepared the tanks for landing?
Well, basically, just your story of what you experienced personally on the landing and the group you were with.
Okay, you had to prepare the tanks first of all for landing, and because you would land in water, you know what I mean. You would land in several feet of water, so you had to have something so that your motor could run and you wouldn't get conked out. So we had what we call breathers. It was made out of tin, and it was funnel shaped from over the top of the back down and underneath the tank. There was they had welded bolts and so on, so that you could slip this on, and then when you got onto the beach, you'd slip it off. You see. So so the first thing we had to do is take those off, because your motor was all controlled with and you wouldn't be able to have your exhaust, so your motor would choke off. So the first thing we do, we're all prepared, practice. As soon as you get up on the beach, you got to deal with the beach sergeant. He's the guy that's in charge of the flow of things to keep going. All right, you got to move out. Come on, get it going. The next wave comes. So you got to get off so the next wave could land. You know what I mean? There was a time thing, and we threw a track. We got rid of our stuff, and somebody's there to put a bulldozer and push those off and decide so this other wave could get in there. You see, and so I threw a track. We had to get out and repair the track, because the ash was like sand. So if you turned your levers, the driver drives with 2 levers. Every brake, and if you pulled on the brake too hard and try to turn too quickly, the track would get slack on the top and come off the bogey wheel, and then you had a problem. You had to take the track apart, fix it up. So that's the process we were in, and trying to do it in a hurry and get room for the other crew come in. But so once we got that done, then we had it easy going up there, going up the next terrace and up on top, and then we went across the island. So
Were you under fire at that point at all?
not really. Not really. We just got something just to know, hey, there's something here. I mean, but we didn't know to the extent of what it was until we got up on top. And see, in the meantime, we had 3 regiments, 26th and 27th Marines. They stayed around and went to Suribachi. The 28th and the tanks, we went across and we were going to go up the other side. See, so the airfield was right here, and that was a finished airfield, and that's, of course, they wanted Iwo Jima as a place for the B-29s after they bombed Japan or got wounded, injured, or so on, damaged. They'd have a place to land. So that was the idea of getting Iwo Jima, to have a place where the crippled B-29s could land. So, all right, so until we got up on top on the level with Airfield 1, then the rain came down. Then we felt the impact of the artillery and so on. So in the meantime, the 2 regiments were, they started at the base of the Suribachi and working their way up because they had dug out the Suribachi and had elevator shafts dug by hand, pick and shovel marks. And they put elevator shafts down the wall of the thing to feed their gun places, see? And it was all by hand. They had blocking falls from the top, and they pulled themselves up and down and fed themselves ammunition and so on. But all around the surface, the front, not the back end they didn't do, but all around the front surface were all gun implants and so on, and artillery and so on. And so once we got up on there and got into that area, then the full force of all that ammunition from that spot and from the high spot in between Airfield 1 and 2. So it was just like steady rain. All you heard for 3 days was, mortars, artillery, machine gun. It just like, in the fireworks at the last, when they finish at the end, everything goes. Well, that's how it was for 3 days. So we didn't really know where we were going, what we were doing, but we know we had to go across the island because we were going, eventually, we were going to go up this side of the airfield, and the other 2 regiments were going to go up the other side. So in the meantime, the engineers are in there looking for landmines, checking for landmines, and so on. So it took about 3 days before when the flag went up. It was what 72 hours, I think. 72 hours. We checked back, and there's some controversy. There has been controversy about the flag. I don't know if you've come across it, but which was the flag or the right one? But the right flag, the first flag, was the proper flag. The next one was the Hollywood version. So the 2 or 3 guys that did that first flag, didn't get credit for it. But I have material to justify that.
Now, were you firing your tank at all?
We were firing our tanks. We're looking ahead to where we go, and we were getting some shots from pillboxes that were above the beach. It's made out of concrete, and they have big guns in there, and so they were near the surface. And then
how effective were your tanks against those pillboxes?
Pretty good. We were doing good. But we weren't able to go too fast because now our ammunition is running out, so we're saying what's going to happen. But in the meantime, the Japanese had light tanks, but they knew they couldn't compete with our tanks. So they backed off. So we were getting what we could get, but they pulled back, and farther down the island they buried them and just used the gun as our piece of artillery. See, so we were shooting what we could. Once in a while you'd see a Jap come up and run around someplace and drop in a hole, and you know, we didn't really know at that time what was happening. But after the flag went up and got that, the basis of all the firing from Suribachi, then we had a relief. And so in the meantime, they decided, because of the situation, they decided that they called on the 3rd Division to make a landing. Well, then the Japanese were prepared. The 3rd Division had to make a landing. They bombed the beaches and so on, and they had to make an old-fashioned landing. Then they see the Japanese aim was to cut off supplies, because if that continued, if we didn't seal off Suribachi, we would have been, we ran out of supplies. We wouldn't have had ammunition. We wouldn't have had fuel. We wouldn't have food, so on. So that was their basic aim. Anyway, after those guys put the flag up, then we were still busy trying to go inch by inch, little as what we could see, until we waited further orders. And then once that happened, and then they knew the 3rd Division was going to land, then we had waited for supplies, because we didn't have any more 75 millimeters. We were running out of machine gun shells and so on. So we couldn't go any further until we were able to get supplies.
Once you were resupplied, what happened at that point?
Right, once we were resupplied, now the 3rd Division came through, and they were now in the middle. And see, so we had 2 regiments go up this side of the airfield. The 3rd Division went up over Airfield 1, and we were over on this side. So then we started this mass moving, going down the island in a 3-pronged position.
So it was basically mopping them up?
Right, right. And getting rid of things that, now still at that time, we didn't know about the underground part. You know, we were saying, hey, where are they? We didn't know. You'd get one here, get one there, but we were dealing mostly with artillery. Then once we got the scourge of the Suribachi off our backs, then they brought in more equipment, more supplies, and then they made supplies off here. Then we were free to get on the beach, and then we began our move up to the north end.
How long did that move take?
Let's see, when did we get to 10? When, let's see, until we got to where? Saipan, that's about 8 days. Now, when is the 18th? 26th of March, 26th when we finished. So we finished 3 days before that. So it was March 23rd by the time we got to the end of the island. All right, so we really run into a hot spot about midway down our side. I can't tell you about what happened to the 3rd Division down the middle or the 4th Division on this side, but we ran against it was a fairly large canyon, and we had we practiced in our when we started with the tanks. We practiced the tanks would go in a line, and the infantry would come behind us. And they welded a telephone on behind the tank so that the leader of the infantry, the captain or whoever was in charge of the infantry, could talk to me, the tank commander, in case they got bogged down with some big gun or something was hurting their infantry the most. They say, okay, boom, boom. Now, so you go to the map and say, oh, okay, such and such a place. Here, there's big gun over here, big, you know what I mean? And so then, see, the gunner, his eyes were on the sights all the time. He's up, he's in a position like this with his sights on, and that's all he does. And I'm sitting behind him, above him, with my knees in his back and my hands on his shoulder. And I give him direction with my hands. My periscope had, the tank commander's periscope had 2-inch thick glass every 3 or 4 inches all the way around it. So I could see all the way around, but the rest of the guys couldn't do that. They had a periscope in front and they could see just what was in front of them. But the gunner didn't have that access to that type of thing. He was focused on staying in the sights, and then he had a lever for the machine gun and a lever for the 75 millimeter. And generally, what we would do is, if we were uncertain, we would use the machine gun to locate the target, to get on target, and then once he was on target, then he'd shut the gun so we wouldn't waste the 75 millimeter. All right. Anyway, getting back to this hot spot. All right. This is probably the toughest position that I was in.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right here because we have to change tapes now. Okay, you mentioned this was the toughest spot you were in?
Right. Okay, we came to a canyon. We were abreast. Infantry was behind us, and they were getting getting plastered, and so we couldn't. At that point, we couldn't go ahead. We had to back up and go around this canyon, so to speak. It wasn't a real deep canyon, maybe 30 yards deep. But on the far side of the canyon was the rock was like a ledge. Mm-hmm. And here's another thing that the Japs did. They built a wall of rock, like a door on your garage. Mm-hmm. So this massive rock, they had it on some type of a pulley system, so that they would raise this big rock like a big door, and then the big gun would come out on the track, fire the shot, and when it recoiled, then the door would drop. So it was a big heavy gun, and it was raising cane on the far end of the island, and they couldn't get it. It was so big. Excuse me. They couldn't get it down, fortunately, low enough to affect us. Mm-hmm. But on either side of it, they had artillery, which was doing that type of thing. So anyway, each battleship, I'm not positive, but there was a battleship on each side of the island. And they have what they call a point, one guy on the island that's to spot the conditions, spot big guns and so on, and then call upon the battleship to shoot their 16-inch shells. Mm-hmm. So the point had recognized this, found this out, and that's the part I saw before we retrieved and come out of there. He had the battleship fire one shot to find out where it was, but by using this chart, this map, he fired one shot, and then they gave him new readings, and they made timing, so when that wall went up, they fired the shot, and they put the shot right down the center and blew it up. And so then we got the command from our colonel we had to back up out of there. We had to get out of there. We're causing too much fire on the infantry, and we had to get out of there so we could advance. Mm-hmm. So at that time, as soon as he did that, see, within the tank, we had what we call an intercom on our radio, and you flick the switch to talk to your crew, and if you want to talk outside to another tank, then you had to flick the switch the other way. So this tank commander panicked. So when the colonel gave him the command to back on out of there, he left his switch on to talk to his tank, to his crew. So when someone's on the air, no one else could use the air. So he's hollering, I could hear it to this day, back right, back left. He's giving commands to his driver. In the meantime, all the other drivers are hearing the same thing. So I saw the shell hole behind me, and I hollered to the loader, J.W. Griffin hollered, tell Homer, hey, not to listen. Boom, and too late. We backed into the shell hole, and then we can't move. We're down in the bottom of the shell hole, and then it's all loose stuff, and we can't move. And then the mortar is starting to fall down on us, and so you can't go out the top. You got to go underneath. What they did, two things now. Before we left, we welded spikes on top of the hatches so the mortars wouldn't blow them in. Right? So that was one help. Anyway, so we had to get out. All right, the escape hatch is on the assistant driver's side. It's a little lever about, and a plate about maybe 18 inches by 24 inches. You pull a lever and it drops. See? And so it's Obie Baker. Obie, I said, come on, Obie, come on, get out of there, drop the hatch. I can't, it won't drop, I won't drop. Well, you got to start digging, because nobody can go till he goes. You see, you have to go. So he's got to dig by his hands and dig a tunnel. In the meantime, I'm looking at through my hatch window, and another tank, which we practiced, the rescue. When some tank is damaged, you come up behind him, and you drop your hatch, and they come out of their tank and drop and go up in your tank, and they take you away. All right, so now he's sitting on the edge of the shell hole. It's the lieutenant from my crew, from my platoon. And see, so he's sitting there, and now he's a dead duck because he can't move. He's stationary, waiting. It's taken us so long to get out because the assistant driver, he's got to dig and get out. Then the driver goes, then the loader goes, and then the tank commander goes, and the gunner's the last one out because he can't go till I go, you see. So
you're trying to tunnel through all this ash and sand?
Yeah, you got to dig underneath you because the tank is embedded down in the ash. See, you dropped at the bottom of the shell hole. So the assistant driver's got to dig with his hands and clear the stuff out, crawl on his belly, dig with his hand, crawl on his belly. Next guy, he's got to dig and crawl out, and then by the time I didn't have to do much digging because the digging is mostly done. But it's a slow process. So in the meantime, just before I'm ready to leave, a shell hits the tank that's waiting for me, waiting for our crew. And I could see the hatches blew open, and the tank commander, he was a good buddy of mine also. But the phone lines are around his helmet, and he's up in the air. He's up in the air, and his lines get caught around those spikes that we welded on the thing, you see what I mean? And then it prevents him from dropping. He gets caught on there, and he hits into the side of the tank because he can't go down, and he's gone, you see? And so anyway, we're getting mortars from the top, so we've got to go. And everybody in his crew is he took a shell right over the assistant driver, right in the assistant driver, and blew up the fire. The tank got fire and so on. In the meantime, another tank comes up to pick up my crew. And so I figured that guy, Lieutenant Simkowski, I figured he was gone, and we didn't get to see him until the 45th reunion in St. Louis. And when he was there, it was amazing. But anyway, you see, because the tank commander panicked, and it caused that whole crew got wiped out. So, all right, now, so where are we now? All right, that was a hot spot I told you about. So anyway, recovering from that, we all come back to the rendezvous area, and we were all, the rest of us, the tanks, we were all really burned up about that guy, so we're going after him, you know, for doing that kind of thing. Well, they were smart down there, and as soon as he got back to the rendezvous area, they shipped him out to hospital ship. See, because he would have got killed,
Mhm.
you know, for doing that kind of thing. So anyway, so we kind of healed our wounds a little bit at that time, and we reconnoitered and got ready to go again. But in the meantime, so all this time now, we had K rations, and later on in the end, they started with C rations. That was a can, like a tuna fish can,
Mhm.
and it had some things in it, some different things. I can't remember exactly what they were, but the K ration was like a Cracker Jack box,
Mhm.
and it had a small can of cheese. That was the same. Two little longitudinal crackers that was the size of the, you know, in the little wrapper, and then you had a vitamin D bar,
Mhm.
and that's what we had 3 times a day, K rations. And then when they got to C rations, you could dig a hole in the ground, it's like almost like sand, and put it in there, cover it up, in 5 minutes it'd be steaming hot.
Just from the heat.
That's right, from the lava, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
The hardened lava, and they lived under there. The Japanese lived under there. All you see is like steam or smoke coming out of those holes. And what the Japs did all the time, and we didn't know this till we get to the end, but they retrieved their dead. As they retrieved, they dragged their dead with them. So we didn't find, you know, you couldn't see any. You know, we knew we shot them, but we couldn't find anybody. You know,
Mhm.
they retrieved them. And then it got to a point on this next phase where, see, instead of going abreast, we had to change our style, because then they came out with these what we call suitcase Charlie. See, the Japanese are brought up to, if you can give your body, give your life for your country, you were a big hero. So they had what you probably heard the term kamikaze.
Mhm.
Okay, that started with airplanes. You know, Pearl Harbor, they kamikazed their planes into the ships and blew
Yep.
themselves up. Well, then they had, for the tanks, they had, we call them Suitcase Charlie, because of like like a little case with a handle on it, with dynamite, and they'd run at the tank and blow themselves up. See? And so, because of that, we then had to go in a file,
Mhm.
where the one tank and then the next tank would protect the first tank. You know, besides doing your other things, you would be cognizant, so they know that the gun could only go down 9 degrees, and if they got underneath that, we couldn't get them. So the tank behind had to do that. So that we had to change our way of maneuvering and attacking from there on in. And then we found that the Japanese, well, let me go back one step. At nighttime, we come back to rendezvous area, and we dug out maybe a foot deep hole that was about the width of the tracks, and we take the tarp from the tank, put it down the hole, drive the tank over it, and we'd face in a semicircle, facing the front lines, take the machine gun out and put it up in the front, and we'd drive the tank over the tarp, and we'd sleep in that hole underneath the tank. And then every 2 hours, we'd rotate the shift. One guy'd stay up and control the machine gun, and then when his tour was up, he'd wake somebody else up, and so we all took a tour. And we had before we leave that, this is kind of it's serious, but it was funny too. Not at the time, but anyway, we told them they had to. In other words, if you had to go at a bathroom facility and do what you had to do, you did it in the empty shell tanks, in empty shells, and so the loader, he was a smaller type guy, and I didn't pick on him intentionally, but he was the one that was caught doing it. But I said, if you have to do that, I slept alongside the opening, and I had a 45, and I had a dagger. Okay. So anyway, he went up to go to the bathroom in an empty shell thing, and he didn't tell me. So one of the other crew I mean, hey, Joe, Jack, jump in the tank, jump in the tank. So I'm ready. I can feel his feet feeling for the shell, for the escape hatch to drop to come through. You had to go with your feet first. So I'm waiting there, and I got my knife out, and I got the gun in this hand, and then I said, okay, I'll wait. As soon as his feet hit the ground, I collected his feet and dragged him in, and I was ready to do what I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And he let out a blood-curdling scream, and see, at first I gave him hell, but then, but let's see, but anyway, lessons to be learned, right? So, in other words, he was lucky, he escaped,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, so, but during the course of us, during the night, the Japanese would come up out of their holes, see, and they could climb up, get on the back of the tank, you know what I mean, and we were told, hey, you do not go out the top of your tank for that purpose. And we're told that. See, because as soon as you could see the silhouette, and boy, so everybody's machine gun, boom, 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 hey, you know, shoot whatever you see out there, movement, you're shooting it. So anyway, this the guy in the outfit, the staff sergeant, he would not be. He opened his thing to peek out to see what is thing, and then the shell, when he got killed, whoop, he slumped down. See, so that tells everybody from there on in, you know, you don't do that kind of stuff. We were told from the beginning. Anyway, see, the Japanese also were told if they got 5 or 6 people before they gave their life, they were a hero.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, you see, so a lot of times they were in a position where they could do that, and see, for instance, now this Jap could shoot the guy if he wanted to live, whatever. But anyway, we found they dug their foxholes vertically. See, we were foxholes were laying down, right? Mm-hmm. Like we did it with a tank, but those who didn't have a tank, you dig your foxhole, you can lay down in it. You know what I mean? So they dug theirs standing up. They had this all dug ahead of time, and they put a rock over the top of the hole. So as the infantry went by, they pushed the rock up, take a shot, drop the rock, nobody would know anything. So it took us quite a while before we learned that. And so then the word got around. And so now the tanks, okay, so now the tanks, okay, besides what you were doing before, any decent sized rock, you were shooting the rock in case they were down in there. So anyway, let's see, so what we do now from there. All right, so we kept on going that way, and gradually getting farther up to the end. It wasn't really a hot spot, but there were 3 tanks in our platoon, and we were in charge of the right flank, and we couldn't, like I say, we couldn't go abreast because the terrain got rocky and so on, so we had to go around a rocky so-called ledge, so to speak. And there were 3 of us, 3 tanks, and my tank hit a mine and exploded and broke up the track, blew the track, and so on. So anyway, there was a rocky ledge behind where a Jap come up out, and I could see him to this day. And his bandage had a bloody bandage around his head. He'd come up, throw the hand grenade, and then drop back down the hole. Mm-hmm. See? So anyway, I'm spotting that as the crew was getting out, going out, and spot, hey, this guy. So I brought the gunner around, mm-hmm. get him to mark where that spot was, and they said, okay, now as soon as he comes out, you go. So because I had to go to get the tank fixed up, the track. So all of us dismounted except the gunner. The gunner, I left him on that mission, and we went down and repaired the tank, and then continued, and that's how I was got the Bronze Star. Mm-hmm. But really, it should have been the whole crew. I mean, it was a whole crew that was involved. I mean, I didn't.
So the gunner did get him.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then we just kept on going. Now at the end of the island, near the end of the island, we didn't know until we got there, where this massive area that was the only soft spot, I guess, on the island. And they had built a hospital underneath, a machine shop, and they had dragged their bodies, so all their dead, the ones they dragged back, were stacked like cordwood in there. So we didn't know about this until we found out the people on our right flank said, hey, they saw people going down in the hole. And and then the engineers said, hey, don't go across this area. This looks, you know, because it was different. They warned them, and then they took some trial tests and found out, hey, there was these rooms dug underneath, all by pick and shovel, hospitals and so on, and lathes. And then they built big A-frames. The bulldozers went to work and dug as much as they could, but then they got these big A-frames, dug a hole, and they were hauling the big lathes and drill presses and those machines out of the hole. So from there to the end of the island, I don't know, what, maybe 50 yards, I guess, 50, 75 yards. Then there was cliffs at the end of the thing. And those who survived, the Japs who survived that far, rather than to get killed, they jumped off the cliffs.
And there were civilians that jumped off too?
There were no civilians,
No?
not that we knew of.
Okay.
Not that we know of.
Okay. And at the end of that mission, once you got back to the end of the island, what happened next? Did you turn around and come back, or were you picked up there?
No, we turned around and went back. And we came back to rendezvous area. You know, in the beginning when they cleared Suribachi, all this area, all was back in there from the end of Airfield 1. Let's see, the island, the widest part was about 3 miles, and it was about maybe 5 miles long. That was the biggest the island was. We were told in the beginning we should be out of there in 3 days, and the most 5 days. See, so we figured, hey, this is a breeze. And so when we got, you know, when they let us on, hey, it's going to be easy, you know what I mean? And then the 3rd Division, when they come up, and they had their hatches open, and they were sitting on the hatches, and we hollered to them, you better shut them up! And you see what I mean? And boy, boom, they no sooner started up the airfield, up on Airfield 1, to get up on there, and boy, the shells started with them, and boy, boom, 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 you can see their heads go down and the hatches drop. So it was funny in a way. But anyway, come back, reconnoiter for a couple days. The last day on the island was the worst day because 4 of us sergeants got into an empty pillbox on the other side, the beach on the other side. And there was room enough for us, the 4 of us, to lay down, you know what I mean? So we lay down in there, and sand trickled from the top of this concrete, and it kept us alert, the sand trickling down. We regretted it, but you know, it was serious at that time because we were scared. It was the least little thing, you know, you get jumpy. But anyway, the sand dropped down, a little bit of wind, the sand trickled down and dropped down on the concrete. So that was the worst day. But then they loaded us on big ships and took us back to our training base.
And where were you when the war ended?
Okay. Anyway, now then when we got back to our training base, excuse me, we didn't do any more work on the tanks. And we didn't know what was happening, but somebody knew. And let's see, so we got back about when in 45, 3, 4, 5, 4, All right, on August, in August, no, 8th, right, August, right?
Mhm.
July, August, right. On August, okay, we headed for Saipan, and at that time, they had a lady called Tokyo Rose,
Mhm.
who was around 7 o'clock each night. She'd come on, all right, Marines, we know where you're going, and this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And then we didn't know till we got to, after we got to Saipan, reloaded, and then they told us we were going to Japan. We were going to make a landing in Japan. So when was it? September. Anyway, the morning that they had the armistice, in other words, the president and those were already meeting someplace. I don't know if it was
For the surrender?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, that was in August, I think, wasn't
Right,
it?
in the end of August. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. We were offshore, so many miles. But anyway, it came over the radio. This was happening, and when we got up and when it got daylight, as far as you could see, any place, there were ships loaded.
Mm-hmm.
Unbeknownst to us, you see. In other words, in preparation for the landing to Japan, they were out there, and undoubtedly they had some kind of inkling about what was happening and probably the possibility maybe of an armistice, whatever, but they were prepared. And from the horizon, from where you were to the horizon, was filled with battleships and cruisers and landing ships and every kind of ship, and aircraft carriers.
When did you hear about the dropping of the atomic bombs?
Now, let's see, where were we now? That was Hiroshima. Hiroshima was the first one.
And then Nagasaki.
Nagasaki, right. Now that was all, that was before. That was all before we went. Yes, that was in the summer, right? That was in the summer before.
Right.
Before
that was like two weeks, or I think a week or two before they actually surrendered.
Right, cause several, yeah. Yeah, that was. We were, I think, on Saipan. We were loading at Saipan or so on. But we were very thankful. God bless our hearts, because we would have never got out of there. Where we were landing, prepared to land, it was a S-shaped channel into Sasebo, which was a seaplane submarine base. And unbelievable, here's another unbelievable thing. They had dug out of the side of the mountain. We come into the base of Sasebo, and there were two submarines already headed out, headed back into the mountain. The mountain was dug out. They assembled the submarines inside the mountain. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And after the Nagasaki bomb, they had some forewarning of some kind, because they had gone up into the woods. There weren't many people that got killed in that bomb. They had some type of premonition. But anyway, as far as you could see, everything was down. You see a chimney, part of a chimney, or part of a tree branch here, or probably something here, but it was unbelievable how everything was leveled. And so, anyway, but we were thankful, because there were mountains on both sides of this channel, all filled with gun emplacement. The channel was just wide enough for one ship to go. They got to go in convoy. So we're going in a ship, weaving down through it, and we're saying we would have been picked off like ducks on a pond.
Now, did you do any occupational
Yes,
duty?
we did, right. We went from there. That was on, let's see, what side? The east side? The west side. That was on the west side. And we went by train around, Kyushu was the island, the southern island. We went around the island up to Oita. I think up to Oita in the train, and crossed the island, and came on the other side. The east side of Kyushu was resort town, Beppu and Aoita. They're shaped like a horseshoe and a terraced mountain with these nice homes and beautiful water. And they used to say that people used to go there as a resort town. So we went through that. Our officers stayed in that area, and they sent the rest of us over to outside. They had a Japanese fort, like military, where they trained, and that's where we went in, the Japanese barracks, and we lived in the Japanese barracks outside of Beppu and Oita.
How were you treated by the civilians?
Well, in the beginning we didn't face any, but then when they found everything was okay and we had landing and everything was all right, they were very bitter. And especially there was one faction who were a larger size, Japanese, usually smaller in stature, but they had one group that was bigger, and they were the ones that created most of the problems. They were very bitter and wanted to create some problems for us. But otherwise, we would go in and out any areas and check to see if there's, whatever it might be. But and that's how we spent our time until I got discharged. We got discharged in the beginning of December 8th or 10th or something.
Whereabouts were you discharged from?
We went to, where'd I go, in San Diego, I think? Yeah. I think San Diego. Yeah. San Diego. Took on 12/6, the 6th of December, 45, to San Diego in 16 days, and did some, we had some things, we collected some things like rifles or which we weren't supposed to, but they kind of sort of let us do it as souvenirs. And box up things to send home, boxed up any equipment in your uniform, and then we came across the country to Bainbridge, Maryland, and there's where we came home from there, from Bainbridge, Maryland.
After you got home, did you make use of the GI Bill or use the 5220?
Yes, I did. I was headed that way, knowingly what was happening. I was focused because at that time I knew I wanted to go, and I had the opportunity to go, and I know I wanted to be a phys ed teacher and a coach. And so I went, we came up, and that summer, or that spring, got married, and I did some odd and end jobs, so on, and then went to Cortland, and got admitted to Cortland, and did my, I went through 3 years, did summer, went through all summers, and then long I was there and long I was getting on the GI Bill, and I said, hey, instead of going there, then going here and there and doing some, trying to get master's work, I said, as long as I have a place and so on. They made a place for married veterans, and so your rent was about $36 a month, I think, for a place.
So you became a phys ed teacher?
Phys ed teacher and a coach, right? Yeah, and I stayed on during the year. I did graduate work. You had so many credits there to get credit for, then you had to go to another institution. And so that in the fall, I stayed on, and I worked as an assistant football coach to get some, some more experience, and then went to Syracuse. I hitchhiked to Syracuse and got 27 hours, which I needed. But then I came back to Cortland and got several more hours in order to get to, I think I needed 32 hours, but I wanted my degree to be from Cortland.
And whereabouts did you teach phys ed?
All right, I started, let's see, right in the beginning, most of the class I was in. All right, let me jump ahead, jump back a little bit. While in the Marines, doing all this thing, I was the only one from my part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the guys from my outfit were from the Midwest and North, and sporadically through, you know, Michigan, Minnesota, that area, Mississippi, and so on. There were a couple of guys on the Virginia and so on, but I was the only one from up in that area. But when I got to Cortland, most of the guys were from Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I wound up when I graduated. I had a chance to go to Gloversville or Lindenhurst on Long Island, and I picked Lindenhurst because I say, okay, most of the guys are going to be down, they got jobs in Long Island, so I'd be there.
Okay. Now let me ask you, did you stay in contact with guys you were in the service with?
Yes, on and off. Right in the beginning, many years went by, and then until we got settled, and they had, well, they had several reunions that I wasn't able to make.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the time and because of my job and so on, so it wasn't until really the 45th reunion at St. Louis when they got in contact with the guys from our outfit who were from you know, Minnesota and Michigan and Wisconsin, and got their addresses and so on, and we had a chance to spend some time together, which was that the reunion was for. And we, you know, we got addresses and so on, and so we were able to make contact. So since that time, then, and then there were two guys from one in maintenance who was with me, and one who was in my platoon as another tank commander from Maryland. They used to come up once a year in the fall, drove up and spend the weekend, and we, you know, go over war stories.
Did you join any veterans organizations at all?
Yeah, American Legion.
How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life? Do you think you would have gone on to college had it not been for the GI Bill?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't have. I wasn't able to. I wasn't financially able to do it. So, so to me, it was a good tiding. I just, and I enjoyed my time, except for seasickness. And that was a deterrent for me. But in order to do the other things that I wanted to do to get what I really wanted, you know what I mean, I had to pay the price. You know, like we suffer before we feel better, and so then when you look back on your life now, when you're at this age, you feel life is a form of suffering and feel better, and you can't feel better till you suffer first. So, I enjoyed my time in the Marines, and I count my blessings that I got back safe. When you see all the things that happened and the guys that happened and whatever, and I count my blessings. See, and I say, okay, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to do the thing that I really wanted to do.
Now, did you bring a few things to show us?
Well, let's see what they had. All right, good conduct medal, which I'll get, and a medal for being on Iwo Jima that supposedly every guy got. And the Bronze Star. Oh, you want to take shots of that?
Well, actually, if you hold it back, if you get too close, I can't focus in on it. It gets blurry. So if you can just tilt them down towards me, I can zoom in on them.
This is a good conduct medal, and this is the Iwo Jima medal.
Okay. All right.
And
Your Bronze Star.
Bronze Star. Okay. That's,
Okay.
all right, and this, I don't know if you want discharge paper, so.
Oh, show me that photo you have there of.
Oh, okay, good. All right, good. And this is the citation, the photo and the citation.
Okay, and that's when you received the Bronze Star?
Yes. Oh, I need the paper clip. I want to slide down.
Now, who is that penning that on you?
Oh, I have to check his name. I forget. Secretary of the Navy, John F. Sullivan.
Oh. Okay. Do you want to read that citation to us?
Okay. This is, as I told you, the time when I lost the track. We were about 100 yards in front of the front lines and so on. The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Bronze Star Medal to Sergeant Joseph Marcino, Jr., United States Marine Corps Reserve, for service as set forth in the following citation. For heroic achievement while serving with the Company A, 5th Tank Battalion, 5th Marine Division, in action against enemy Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, Volcano Islands, on 18th of March 1945. When his tank was disabled while operating against the enemy approximately 150 yards forward of the front lines, Sergeant Marcino continued to deliver fire on the enemy for several minutes. Then, dismounting from the vehicle, he directed his crew in repairing the damage despite intense sniper fire, which was brought to bear on the wrecked tank, and remanning his tank, continued to press the attack against the enemy. His perseverance, courage, and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest tradition of the United States Naval Service. Sergeant Marcino is authorized to wear the Combat V. For the President, John F. Sullivan, Secretary of the Navy.
Okay, very nice.
Or are there any other particular thoughts, anything has crossed your mind that said that we go back or, you know?
No, I think we're all set.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your interview.
Well, you're welcome.